The largest man-made reservoir in Texas is not drying up. Not even close. Toledo Bend, a sprawling 4.47 million acre-foot lake straddling the Louisiana border, is nearly full. It sits in the green, rain-soaked East Texas piney woods, a different world from the story you're about to hear. The headline is a half-truth, and the real story is far more terrifying. A different network of massive Texas reservoirs is dying, not just shrinking, but functionally vanishing. Vast basins of water, designed to sustain millions, have fallen below 10% capacity, exposing miles of cracked, sun-baked clay. And because of it, an American city of 500,000 people is now on a collision course with day zero. The city is Corpus Christi, the 8th largest in Texas. Based on an analysis of depletion rates from June 2026, the city is projected to enter a level 1 water emergency by December of this year, or early 2027. That is the point at which demand officially outstrips supply. A major industrial port, the largest for crude oil exports in the United States, is about to run out of water. And the strangest part of this story is not that the reservoirs are empty. It's why they are empty, and who is being forced to pay the price. To understand what is happening in South Texas, you have to understand the two lakes that Corpus Christi depends on. They are called Choke Canyon Reservoir and Lake Corpus Christi. And as of this summer, their combined storage was hovering at a catastrophic 13%. Let's start with Choke Canyon. It's the single largest freshwater source in all of South Texas, a sprawling man-made lake on the Rio River. When full, it holds over 660,000 acre-feet of water. Today, its capacity is just over 8%. The boat ramps end 100 yards from the water's edge. Old fence lines and submerged farm roads from the 1970s are now reappearing as dry land. The local news in the nearby town of Three Rivers doesn't run fishing reports anymore. They run photos of the lake bed, a gray, desolate landscape of cracked earth and dead trees. The water that remains is being actively drained, pumped downstream toward Corpus Christi to keep the city's intake pipes from sucking air. This is where the story gets its first human conflict. The small town of Three Rivers, population 1,800, pulls its water directly from Choke Canyon. The town feels like it's watching its entire future get siphoned away by its giant metropolitan neighbor. To them, it feels like theft. To Corpus Christi, a city of over 300,000 people with a metro area of 500,000. It's a matter of sheer survival. The city's water chief operating officer, Nick Winkleman, is faced with an impossible geometric problem. As the lake level drops, the water's surface area shrinks, pulling away from the intake pumps. To get the water out, you have to release even more water downstream to raise the level at the dam, sacrificing a huge amount to evaporation just to move what's left. It's a losing battle fought every single day, and the residents of Corpus Christi are the ones on the front lines. In August of 2024, the city entered strict Stage 2, then Stage 3. Watering your lawn with a sprinkler is illegal. Let me repeat that. In the crushing 100-degree heat of a South Texas summer, letting a sprinkler run on your grass can earn you a $500 fine. Car washes are restricted. Restaurants can only serve water if a customer explicitly asks for it. City manager Peter Zanoni has been on a near-constant media tour for months, his face a fixture on evening news broadcasts, warning the public that the situation is dire. He is the one who has to sell the public on the idea of a day zero, a phrase made famous by Cape Town, South Africa. It's the day the taps could be turned off. But here is the detail that tells the real story. The one that turns this from a climate story into a political one. While residents face $500 fines for watering a tomato plant, just miles away, a small group of 12 industrial companies are legally exempt from the drought restrictions. These are the petrochemical plants, the plastics manufacturers, and the refineries that form the backbone of the city's industrial tax base. Together, these 12 companies consume 55% of Corpus Christi's entire water supply, more than all the residents, businesses, schools, and hospitals combined. The largest of these is a multi-billion-dollar plastics plant, a joint venture between ExxonMobil and the Saudi Basic Industries Corporation, or SABIC. And not only are they exempt from the cutbacks, they pay a heavily discounted rate for their water. As residents pay their utility bills, that water is being sold to heavy industry for just 31 cents per 1,000 gallons. That's the arrangement. A $500 fine for a citizen, 31 cents for the plant next door using millions of gallons a day, 55% of the city's water. I'm actually curious what you think about how that system is structured. The city government argues this is a necessary evil. Nick Winkleman's job is explicitly to secure these industrial water contracts to help fund the city's future. The argument is that without industry, there is no tax base. Without the tax base, there is no money to build new water infrastructure. It's a gamble that Texas cities have been making for decades. Trade cheap water for economic growth, and for 50 years, as long as it rained, the gamble paid off. Now, the bill is coming due, the city bet on rain, and the sky stopped paying out. The crisis has been building for years. A megadrought settled over the region, intensified by record-breaking heat domes that accelerated evaporation. A brief, heavy storm in late May of 2026 offered a flicker of hope. It poured over Lake Corpus Christi, bumping its level from a terrifying 8% up to a merely catastrophic 27%. But the storm cells completely missed the massive basin of Choke Canyon Reservoir to the west. It received almost nothing. The combined storage barely moved. It was a temporary reprieve, not a rescue. And the clock kept ticking toward December. Now, here's the part nobody is putting on the news. This isn't just a Corpus Christi problem. This is a statewide infrastructure collapse happening in slow motion. Zoom out a few hundred miles northwest into the Texas Hill Country. Here, a reservoir named Medina Lake has effectively ceased to exist. It has collapsed to just 4% of its capacity. The pictures are biblical. A massive concrete dam holding back a thin green puddle in a canyon of rock. Marinas sit on dry land, their docks pointing accusatorily at a phantom waterline dozens of feet up the canyon walls. Again, the easy answer is drought. And again, the real answer is far more complicated and far more damning. A recent data study revealed something shocking. Of all the water that is released from Medina Lake for downstream farmers, 75% of it never reaches a single crop. It leaks. It seeps into the ground through a 110-year-old network of unlined earthen canals. These aren't pipes. They're ditches, dug out of the dirt in the early 20th century. For every 100 gallons sent down the canal system managed by the Bexar Medina Atascosa Irrigation District, or BMA, 75 gallons are simply absorbed by the dirt before they get to a farm. The lake isn't just evaporating. It's bleeding out into the ground through infrastructure that is more than a century old. This isn't a climate failure. It's an engineering failure. It's the story of an entire state built on a 20th century water system that is crumbling under 21st century pressures. And stories like this are happening all over the state. Lake Livingston, which supplies Houston, is facing structural problems with its dam. The ground beneath it is sinking. Even the lakes that have water are threatening to fail. It's clear that Texas isn't just running out of rain. It's running out of time to fix itself. If you find digging into the hidden state of our infrastructure interesting, a subscription to the channel is the easiest way to make sure you see our next investigation. Every project like this one is funded by viewers like you. Now zoom out even further, to the southern tip of Texas, the U.S. Mexico border. Here, the crisis takes on an international dimension. Two colossal reservoirs, Amistad and Falcon, anchor the entire water supply for the Rio Grande Valley. Amistad, when full, is the second largest lake in all of Texas. As of June 2026, it was just 29% full. Further downstream, Falcon International Reservoir was at 23%. These lakes aren't just for Texas. They are governed by a water treaty signed between the United States and Mexico all the way back in 1944. It was an ambitious agreement meant to share the resources of the Rio Grande. Under the treaty, Mexico is required to release a certain amount of water from its own tributary rivers into the shared reservoirs over a 5-year cycle. But for the last several years, Mexico hasn't been able to pay its water debt because Mexico is facing its own historic, crippling drought, even worse than the one in Texas. They don't have the water to give. Maria Elena Giner, the U.S. Commissioner of the International Boundary and Water Commission, the agency that manages this treaty, has been issuing stark warnings. The entire Rio Grande Valley, a massive agricultural hub on both sides of the border, must fundamentally change its relationship with water. The old way is over. The reservoirs are failing. In April of 2026, a major American city took a step that would have been unthinkable a decade ago. Albuquerque, New Mexico, hundreds of miles upstream on the same Rio Grande, announced it was stopping all surface water withdrawals from the river. The entire city shifted to 100% groundwater reserves. They did this months before the peak summer heat in an attempt to preserve what little flow remained in the river for ecosystems and downstream users. The system is breaking from top to bottom. The Rio Grande, the lifeblood of the American Southwest, is faltering. Which brings us back to Corpus Christi, a city on the coast, a city surrounded by the largest body of water on Earth, the Gulf of Mexico. The obvious solution, the one that has been debated for years, is desalination, taking seawater and turning it into fresh drinking water. It's expensive, it's energy intensive, but it is, in the words of city manager Peter Zanoni, drought-proof. For years, the city has flirted with the idea. In September 2025, an ambitious $1.2 billion plan for a plant in the city's inner harbor was canceled over a potent combination of environmental concerns and financial sticker shock. But as the reservoirs kept dropping through the winter of 2026, the plan came roaring back to life. The city council was forced to confront the issue. An emergency meeting was called. And on June 3, 2026, the Corpus Christi City Council convened for what would become a 15-hour marathon session. It began in the afternoon and stretched through the evening, past midnight and into the early morning hours. The debate was bitter. On one side, the mayor and city manager argued that the city had no choice. They needed to approve a billion-dollar plant immediately to demonstrate to industry and residents that Corpus Christi had a future. They painted a grim picture of economic collapse if the city was perceived as unable to secure its own water supply. On the other side, council members like Gil Hernandez and Eric Cantu pushed back. They were deeply concerned about the cost. A billion-dollar project would mean skyrocketing water bills for the same residents who were already being asked to sacrifice. They worried about fairness. They worried about rushing into a massive industrial project without fully understanding the environmental impact on the bay. At the heart of the debate was a raw political fear. In a quote to the press, Councilmember Gil Hernandez summed up his hesitation. "You're asking us to go out on a limb, and I'm not comfortable with it. It is a pretty intense and complex situation, low-key. Share this with someone who follows stories about city politics and infrastructure." There's a lot to unpack here. Finally, at 2:20 in the morning, the vote was called. The council voted 7-2 to delay the final decision on the desalination plant. They kicked the can down the road, pushing the next major vote to September 2026. What that delay means in practical terms is that even if the plant is approved in September, the earliest any new water could flow from it is late 2029. The city, facing a water deficit in December 2026, just voted to ensure no new water source would be available for at least 3 more years. The decision sent a shockwave of fear through the local business community. The gamble is now on the sky. The entire economic future of the 8th largest city in Texas rests on the hope that a tropical storm or a hurricane will appear in the Gulf and sit over South Texas for days, refilling the basins of Choke Canyon and Lake Corpus Christi. Without an act of God, the math no longer works. So we are left with a series of cascading failures. An infrastructure failure, with century-old canals leaking water into the dirt. A policy failure, where a city sold off the majority of its water to industry at a discount, leaving its own citizens to bear the full weight of conservation. A political failure, a city council paralyzed by the cost of the only viable solution. And an international failure, a water treaty broken by a climate that has changed faster than the laws that govern it. This is the story of modern Texas. A state that aggressively courted the world's most water-intensive industries, promising them cheap and abundant resources, only to discover the resources were neither. Colin McDonald, an expert at the Texas Water Foundation, summed it up perfectly at a recent forum. "We're not running out of water," he said. "We're running out of cheap water." The state now estimates it will need to invest $174 billion in its water infrastructure by 2060 to avoid a statewide crisis. Money that it does not have. Money that will have to come from taxpayers and ratepayers across the state. The question in the title was, which city runs out first? The answer is more complex than a single name. Corpus Christi is the first major city to face a day zero countdown. But what about Three Rivers, the small town watching its lake get drained out from under it? What about the farming communities in the Rio Grande Valley, dependent on a treaty with a country that has no water to spare? What about the future suburbs of San Antonio that relied on a full Medina Lake that no longer exists? The crisis isn't a single event. It's a series of dominoes, and they are already falling. So, 3 questions hang over Texas tonight. How long can 500,000 people in an industrial hub survive on 13% of their water supply? What happens to the social contract when residents are punished for using a garden hose while factories are exempt? And what does it mean for the future of the American economy when one of its most vital energy and manufacturing hubs can no longer guarantee the most basic resource of all? The politicians in Corpus Christi have punted their decision to September. They are waiting, hoping for rain. But the heat of the Texas summer is just beginning. The evaporation is accelerating, and the water level at Choke Canyon Reservoir is still falling, one agonizing inch at a time. The residents of Corpus Christi are looking at their brown lawns, paying their water bills, and waiting. The small town of Three Rivers is watching its future flow downstream, and the winter of 2026 is on its way.